Should you finish your garden?
Everyone, good everyone. All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our panel discussion this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about amateur owned and trained, which hopefully everyone will learn a little bit more about. We're excited to have 4 exhibitors with us and be able to share their experiences with the division and hopefully provide a few tips on how you can get started. So again, thank you guys for joining us for our newest edition of our conversation series here on the Regional Foxtrotting Horse Foundation Facebook page. So to start off, we're going to do some quick introductions for everyone. So for our panel participants, if you could briefly share, obviously your name, where you're from and how you got started in Foxtrotters. We'll just kind of go around the room here and we will start with Alan.
Well, Alan King, I live in Harrison, Arkansas, and I actually got started in the Foxtrotters in the spring of 1995. Some in-laws had a horse that was in a 3-year fraternity trained by Brian Biggs at the time, and that kind of got me going with that, and then kind of ended up getting really involved with it, and I showed that mare for a while, and but that's kind of how I got started.
Alan, were you into horses before that?
I never owned a horse. My parents would never let us have a horse when I was growing up. And then since when I moved to Harrison, got my job in my own place, was able to have horses, that's kind of when it started. As far as being able to have horses. Friends had horses, rode their horses and things like that. But that was kind of the start.
Okay, well, great. We're happy to have you here, Alan. So we'll go to Alexis next.
Well, my name's Alexis Zastoupil, and I'm from Whitewright, Texas. And I got started on amateur owned and trained just because we live in Texas. There's not many show trainers down this way. And also my mom trained or worked in trainers' barns for a while. So I just grew up in a barn learning from her. And then here we are, we both kind of team up now and work on a few at a time.
So has it always been Foxtrotters for you?
Yeah, I've had a couple of stock horses. I think we've had a quarter horse in the paint at one time or another, but mostly Foxtrotters the whole way through.
All right, well, very good. So next we will go to Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Stangl, and I like to tell people that I've been riding my entire life, literally. My mom was preparing to go to the celebration the year that I was born, and she did a local show in August, and my dad finally said, "You are too pregnant to be going and showing." So he put his foot down. They didn't end up going, and I was born the week after the celebration that year. So I just tell people I've been riding Foxtrotters my whole life. And I'm from Bonner Springs, Kansas. I think I forgot to say that.
All right, very good. And on the phone, we have Roger. So Roger, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Roger Dedmon. We live at Rogersville. I was raised just at the town Mansfield, north of Ava. As a kid growing up, I think I bought my first horse when I was 14. I called him Mr. Ed. That was before Mr. Ed on the television. But growing up, I had horses till I graduated and got married and moved to Springfield. And Uncle Sam took me away from horses for a few years. And then later on, my kids come along and we moved back to the country. And they showed horses. I think the fact that a few times I had 3 kids in the youth class at the same time, that'll be hard on your nerves. But I've just enjoyed horses, been around them all my life. And they enjoy showing in the amateur owned and trained division. Just, I guess it's because the fact that you take pride in doing it yourself, you know.
So Roger, did you start with Foxtrotters, or did they come along at some other point along your horse journey?
No, I started with Foxtrotters, and that's been it. I, as a kid, rode trail rides and rode horses with some of the founders of the breed. I can remember going as a small kid, going to the horse shows there at the old Ava Fairgrounds before the facilities that we have now. So, always been Foxtrotters. That's my horse.
All right. Well, very good. Well, again, thank you guys so much for joining us. So a lot of the people that are probably watching are not familiar with amateur owned and trained and where that really fits into the Missouri foxtrotting horse breed. So who would like to tackle just sort of describing what amateur owned and trained is? And I'll call on you, just volunteer. So
my comment is in the beginning, we was all amateur owned and trained. The very beginning of the Foxtrotters and the shows, it was individuals showing their own horses that they raised and trained and showed themselves in the beginning. It was only later on that trainers started coming into the breed and you started having the different divisions. But as I say, in the beginning, everyone was an amateur owned and trained. We trained our own horses.
So others want to tackle sort of what this division looks like in our breed as far as how it's different than other things? Alan, I saw you unmute.
I was gonna say, Amy, your turn. Well, Roger kind of hit it a little bit when he is talking about it, but you know, you kind of take the pride in doing it all yourself, breaking them, and of course there is a 30-day period that they can be sent somewhere to be ridden. But just kind of more of a pride deal for me. I enjoy doing it. Like I said earlier, was around Brian Biggs for my first 3 or 4 or 5 years. Seems like learning things that he did, and I went to other people's barns to learn, like Gino's and David Ogles and Randy Williams. Some of those I've been to several different trainers' barns just learning, but just taking things that you've learned, kind of like when you go, and I coach for a living, so trying to get your horse to be at their best potential and having your own pride and getting it done that way, which you know, it takes a lot of work, that's for sure, but mainly just the pride deal and doing it yourself and being happy with your results, whether they're good or bad, but know that you tried to do your best with them.
So Alan, you mentioned one of the rules there with the 30-day breaking period. Are there other rules that people that are thinking about getting involved in amateur owned and trained that they should be thinking about? I'll go to Alexis for that question. If there are certain rules that people should be aware of, and if you need help, I actually can pull them up and share them. If that would be, you guys think that would be helpful?
I mean, I may be able to hit some of them. I don't know if I'll get all of them. But talking about some of the rules with it, that you have to be an amateur rider, meaning that you basically cannot get paid to ride other people's horses. Of course, there's much more standard wording to it in the actual rule book. But that's one big thing, is you can't make your living or get paid to be able to train or ride horses for other people. And then another big one is being amateur owned and trained, that you do have to own the horse. I believe there is a specific time frame that you have to buy the horse before. Talking about the futurity in particular. But the biggest thing too is with amateur owned and trained, it's very along the lines of amateur owned. that you cannot own the horse with anybody that's not an immediate family member. That's pretty big ones, I think.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll just quickly share this for those of you that are watching so you can kind of see it. And I just pulled these out of the MFTHBA rule book, and most shows, like we have amateur train at the regional, the Region 4 Fall Festival, and we use these same rules. Most shows you go to use these same rules as well. But Alexis mentioned the transfer of ownership. It does say it has to be 60 days prior to the date the horse is shown. And I think the 3-year-old fraternity may have a different time frame on that. Can't remember off the top of my head, but it's kind of that ownership and that transfer. But then what Alan mentioned was the training of the horse. And there is a 30-day breaking period that people can use. So if someone needs to send their horse off to get sort of the basics, and it describes what that is, they can do that. But it has to be, just 30 days. And then after that, the horse has to be amateur owned. Hopefully that's helpful. And you saw on the last slide, actually, it had the page number in the rule book. If anyone wants to look it up, it's on page 73, actually crosses 2 pages. So hopefully that's helpful to a few people. So what are some other things that people should know about amateur owned and if they're going to get started?
Well, it is a lot of hard work. I will say that. And I think that Roger and Alexis and Alan are by far more expert at it than I am. I always tell people I'm the world's slowest horse trainer. But it is a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication and things like that. But I guess the one thing that I really like about this division is that we do help each other a lot. At shows, boy, Alexis came in handy for me at the fraternity last year, and Alan's always given me advice and things like that. So we do help each other a lot through the process, but it is a lot of hard work and a lot of time spent for sure.
So we're going to kind of go around the horn here. Who is currently training a horse for the upcoming 3-year-old fraternity? Alan's raising his hand. Amy. Roger, do you have a horse that you're currently training?
I do not this year.
Okay. Alexis, how about you?
Not this year. Next year, I have a handful though.
Okay. Do you guys normally raise the horses that you put into that division, or are they ones that you're going to go out and purchase?
Well, this year, most of mine have all been, I've raised them. Last year I did buy a horse because I'm missing some in that age group. So I did buy a horse last year and showed in the amateur owned train with that in the 3-year-old fraternity. But majority of all of mine have been, I've raised them. So that's kind of what I like to do, but you can go out there and buy them as well and find one that's gated right. And one thing I'll back up a little bit on the training part. I was fortunate enough to have somebody that a horse is already set up. So if somebody's getting into it, they don't understand the walk, they don't understand the trot. It's hard to put one together when you don't understand any of that. So they should, to my opinion, go out and find a pretty good horse that they just sit there and walk, and they sit there and foxtrot until they get the feel of their seat in the saddle, or their seat from the saddle and the horse walking and trotting. And then if they can find people that live close enough to them, or if they're fortunate enough, like I was, that had trainers, 3 or 4 different trainers within an hour and a half of me, to go up there and watch and ask and listen and see how they do things, and they can end up being better. But majority of mine have been I raised.
Anyone different than that?
No, I'm the same. I haven't I haven't shown very many, but until this year, now we bought her when she was still on her mom's side, but the rest we've raised.
How about you, Roger?
In the past, we've raised some of our own, and we've also bought a couple outside horses that I've showed. I like to raise my own, but don't always have a colt every year. We don't have a lot of horses. So some I've been lucky to have been my own, and some I've bought out.
Okay.
Main thing to look for is just a horse with good breeding and good disposition. As I always said, if you have a good horse, it doesn't take much of a trainer. So that's how I got lucky.
So a question I hear a lot from individuals is, okay, you guys have started a horse, you showed it at the 3-0 Futurity, it's amateur owned and trained, and someone purchases that horse. Can they continue to ride it in amateur owned and trained classes? Or does it is just with that first person that does that initial training?
I'm not sure what the rule book actually says, but to me, if an amateur owns a horse and they sell it to an amateur, it's still amateur owned and trained. But I'm not really 100. I'm surprised I'm not 100% sure on the rule book on this, but I don't know the technical answer, but to me, it's still amateur owned and trained. The amateur has it, the amateur bought it. They're still doing the riding. So,
Anyone disagree with that? Alan normally
I can
knows.
say I do in a sense. To me, and it all depends on how you interpret the rule book. And there, I don't know if it's on that page or if it's on the futurity side. I don't remember where, but there was something that says that the horse being ridden has to be trained by the person riding it. And that it's all, again, how you interpret it. So to me, that if you sold it and then they want to ride it, they're not technically amateur owned and trained because they didn't train the horse that's already trained.
Mhm.
That's just my thought process, though.
Well, it's a common question, and you know, probably a little bit of gray area there, but I knew that would be a question people had out there on how that worked. So Roger's kind of mentioned a little bit about what to look for, and Alan. So let's start back. Alan mentioned that this is probably not the division for someone brand new to the breed. So let's talk about this from the standpoint of someone that maybe's been around a little bit and they want to do an amateur owned and trained horse. What would you tell them to go out and look for in getting a horse to do amateur owned and trained with?
I think disposition is huge. Obviously, as Roger said, talent, like if they're talented, you know, that obviously, but for this division, it makes it a lot easier if they are willing and want to please and do what, you know, you're asking them to do. That goes a long way in this division, I think.
going along with the talent part, one of my big things that I look at in any horse is how they use their front end. Are they kind of short up front with it? Do they actually use their shoulder and move it on out? You know, just naturally out in the field and towards their, at least the point of their nose or close to their chin as possible. So that's one of the things I actually look for. Do they naturally trot out in the field? Some do, and you know, some don't. You might have a pacey horse, so you got to kind of be careful on that. How you want to do that part of it, but probably the front end's my biggest thing I like to look at. But I think the back end you can get there, but you can't get the front end or the back if you don't have it. It's just not, to me, not ever going to get where it needs to be.
Roger, do you have any tips?
I agree with Alan there, because if you don't have a front end, you don't have much of anything. One of the things too that is having someone, not necessarily to help you, but a ground person or You can have ground help and do your own training, and through the eyes of other people really helps you a lot. Of course, modern day videos and cameras and things that we didn't have many years ago is a tremendous aid, where that you can see on the video what your horse is doing. And of course, it's always nice to have your wife down there telling you you're doing something wrong, but that does help, you know.
It sounds like you have experience with that, Roger.
Oh yes, 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 yes. No, she has developed a pretty good eye for a horse, and really helps me to. She can see the changes when the horse is going in the right direction or the wrong direction. What we usually find out is the horse is going in the right direction, I'm going in the wrong direction. So there we are.
Very good. So what does the training process look like as far as, Amy, were you going to add something into that?
Well, I was just going to go along with what Roger said, and I ride by well, not as much anymore. I have a young girl that rides with me a lot now, but there for a while I rode by myself all the time, and that makes it really challenging. And so they do make this awesome little thing called a pivo, and it will follow you around, your horse around the arena. You put your phone in it, and it is really, if you're riding by yourself, an awesome thing to have, where you can watch your ride and help yourself improving and things like that. If your ground coach is at work, like mine usually is, or whatever that may be. But so I just wanted to add that in too. It's a good thing to have if you have to ride by yourself, because that does make it hard.
Alexis, sounds like you have a ground coach with your mom.
Yeah, typically. And usually it'll be one thing like, that looks terrible, you need to quit. Or, hey, that's looking pretty good, keep doing what you're doing. So one of those that we do help each other a lot when it comes to ground coaching.
So talk to me how the process starts. So do you just jump right in and start preparing them for the show? What is the first couple months of an amateur owned and trained horse look like as far as what you're working on?
Groundwork.
Groundwork. So a lot of groundwork. And when do you start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if we raise the baby, playing with it from the moment it hits the ground, the sweeter you can get it. You don't want it too sweet, but the more gentle it can be, the better off you're going to be. And then we'll work up that. We have like a little kid saddle that sometimes we'll go put on like some of the babies that are between 6 months to a year. And then we'll start putting on a full saddle and round pinning and all of that, leading up to about the time they're ready to start riding. But it's a lot of groundwork, because the more you have their mind on the ground, the better off you'll be on their back.
I'll add to Alexis, because I follow or do the Clinton Anderson fundamental groundwork with all of my trail horses, show horses, whatever. I start them off all the same. And like she's saying, the groundwork and teaching them the flex, teaching them the back, teaching them the elder forequarters, hindquarters, all that you can do on the ground and just help better. And I found that actually mine have been softer in the mouth once I decided to put a regular bit in their mouth, doing all of that with the flexing, vertical, lateral, all of it, rib cage, bending exercise, all kinds of. I do that for about 60 days once I start riding them. And like Alexis does, once we have them, they're halter broke within 2 or 3 days and ready to go to the next step, and just build on that all the time with them up to where we get them.
I agree. Like, that's one reason I like to probably raise them, is that you can do all that stuff from the get-go and they're ready to go. One thing that, like, I've been starting with my 3-year-old for this year is I also trail ride them a lot. Hills, especially back in, but they're gonna see a lot of things on the trail that will definitely help prepare them for the show, things like that. And I do other things with them besides just going in circles for sure.
How about you, Roger? What's the start look like for you?
I agree with a lot of what Alan said there. Ground is very important. I like to drive my colts. I like to teach them everything that I want them to do when I'm on the ground before I ever get on their back. And probably the main thing too is always remember, start out slow. Because if they can't do it right slow, they'll never do it right fast. And I think that's where a lot of people limit the natural talent of a horse, is because they ask too much out of them speed-wise too fast. And the horse learns to compensate for that by getting short in the front end. So that's just always been my guideline. They got to do it. If they can't do it right slow, they won't ever get any better. So work on slow. And patience.
Lots of smiles on the patience part, Roger. I think people agree with that. All right, so then once it sounds like everyone gets them broke to start with, sort of comfortable doing all those things. So you're ready to start preparing. We're a little less than 4 months right now away from the 3-year-old for charity. So what does the prep look like preparing an amateur-owned and trained horse to go to the 3-year-old for charity?
Repeat that again, please, ma'am.
So we talked about getting started. So you guys talked about the groundwork and all those things. So we're starting to get close to the 3-year-old for charity. We're about 4 months away or so. So what does it start to look like as you start to get closer to showing a 3-year-old at the 3-year-old for charity?
If you're lucky, you wait about. Go ahead, Alan.
No, you go, Roger.
I was just going to say, if you're lucky, you can wait about another 2 months before you start. I carried
You
the
have
garland.
done that.
I carried the garland out in 61 days.
I've never been that lucky.
Okay, so Roger, tell us that story.
Well, this is back in 2008 on the little tag mare. I broke Michelle's horse for her and got her started, and I took Tag out to Karen Grady's. We didn't have a barn at that time. And 61 days later, I rode out of the ring with a garland, a 3-year-old for 30. So
what was your secret there?
Oh, a good horse and a poor trainer. She was a natural. I put chains on her one time just to get her to slow down. And other than that, she's just natural.
I would guess that's not the norm, right? 61 days is not the norm for everybody.
I was lucky. I was just very lucky. She was just a natural horse, and as I say, that's what I rode her. She done it and still does, you know. But that's a little definitely unusual.
So Alan, what were you going to say with that?
Well, I mean, I'll take this one that we have now. Started it kind of in the early summer last year, rode it for a week or two, did some stuff, turned it out, got it back up, rode it some more for another 2 weeks or so, turned it back out, and then rode it a little bit more. So I probably had 45 days total, but just to make sure he was really broke and gentle, because we plan on Lisa showing this horse. And then actually I started in riding him in I guess middle of November for another 45 days, and then I gave him pretty much most of January off. Then I started back in on him in February. But the closer you get, you have to actually, I start after they're broke, then I don't really worry about their mouth so much. I'll just, okay, let's get them to trot. And once I get them to trotting, then they can stay at the trot. And a lot of people will do the walk first, but it just kind of depends on which horse I have and what they're doing. But this one, I felt like I needed to get him trotting first. And so we've been doing that, and then we've backed that down to where he can trot walk now, and he's getting a little bit more square. And then we'll eventually do trot and trot walk, and then work our way back down to the walk, where a lot of people get to walk first in their mouth and then move up. But on this one, I just decided to go back, actually the other end of the spectrum, and go backwards. But just lots of riding, and closer we get, then I'll probably start getting up earlier and riding before I go to work. And I'll get home that evening. I'll probably ride him another 20, and when I ride him, it'll be 20, 30 minutes at a time. And then just a lot of wet saddle blankets. That's what ends up making it. Like Roger, he likes telling that story, but he said it's a natural horse. But he might have rode that horse 3 times a day in that 61 days. I'm not really sure. Being retired, he could do that. And when it gets summer, I'll do that. I'll ride a horse 15, 20 minutes in the morning, then getting back out later for another 15 minutes, and then getting back that evening, riding another 15 minutes, which only total 45 minutes, where a lot of people might ride them 45 minutes to an hour and a half solid, or not a solid. They get air breaks. But in one session where I feel like you build on that, it's kind of like I do my cross country athletes. We run the intervals. Like today, we had mile repeats. So we did a mile, gave them some rest, did a mile, gave them some rest, did a mile. So then just different things that you do like that, you kind of train the muscle. And it just like shooting basketball, you train your arm and train your shot. You got to train the muscle in the horse to do some of those things too.
Good tips, Alan. So Alexis, a couple years ago, was it 2020, you won the amateur owned and trained futurity. So on a horse named Squirrel, because everyone can remember her name. So what did that training process look like for her?
Well, Squirrel was named Squirrel for a reason. She was one of those that would chase squirrels. She'd see something and she'd just spook from it. So I had to have a lot of patience with her. It took a lot of just either short bursts or longer rides, like Alan was saying, that you can do it in either one, and you just got to kind of play off of it. And honestly, there was a couple of days that I'd get on, the wind was blowing really hard. We don't have a covered arena or anything. And I'd be going, she wasn't paying attention to me. So I got off. If I am not going to get anything productive out of it, then I'm going to let that one slide, and I'm going to go the next day and we're going to work on it again. So there are times where you have to have that patience and knowing, especially with her type, because squirrels like to chase squirrels, as I call it.
So Amy, I don't think you have an indoor arena either. So how does that training process work for you?
Yeah, no, I wish I did. I've actually the last 2 years, last year and this year, taken advantage of the 30-day breaking, and that's helped tremendously, having somebody else start them. I don't have to start as early in on the process because I am very, very slow with everything that I do. But I end up riding, as Alexis says, like when it's windy, and I ride out there in the rain, and I ride because it doesn't work for me to get up and ride before I go to school. So I only until summer can ride after school. So I just have to usually ride in the weather, whatever it may be. And, that's good and bad. Fortunately, my horses that I've had have had pretty good dispositions and haven't minded any of those things. But yeah, I just have to ride every possible chance that I get.
So thinking about tips you'd give to people that are starting with this, what do you wish you'd known with the first horse that you did amateur owned and trained with that you know now?
No two horses are going to be alike. When I got one figured out and I started my next one, she was completely different than the first one. And then I got her figured out, and the next one was completely different than the last two. So just be prepared. It's constantly changing, constantly learning.
How, oh, Alan gave a thumbs up. You're not going to add anything to that?
I think that Amy kind of hit it the nail on the head, so to speak. I mean, because uh, you know, throughout the years since 1996 and probably about 1997, I got raised my own horse and started breaking it and doing my own stuff with that. There, some were kind of, you might think, well, this one's kind of like that one, but there then something be totally different that changes your mind about them. So what she said, pretty correct. But as a beginner, you know, I was lucky and fortunate enough to have people around me and that helped me, like Brian Biggs, like I said, you know, he helped me, Roger Biggs, they both helped me through a lot, and I learned a lot. So it's good before I even had my first actual amateur owned trained horse that I did. So I learned a lot through that and was able to apply a lot of things. And people, like I said earlier, you know, if you can get to a trainer and just, you know, go to more than just one. Don't just pick one and this is the one you want to do, because unless you're using them, it's
Alan, you got muted somehow.
if you want to use trainers later, that's fine to find you one that you like and get along with. But one thing that you can learn from different trainers, what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and the ones that I've been around have always been very helpful and gave me advice and kind of combined several different people's things that they do that's kind of helped me.
How about you, Roger? What do you wish you'd have known the first horse you trained that you know now?
Oh, it's a learning experience, and over the years that I've ridden horses, I haven't shown that much till after I retired. But the style of horse that we have changed. Years ago, with the old style horses, you would walk them at least 30 days before you would ever ask them to trot, because the trot was their natural gait. And now with the breeding that we have, most of the horses we have today, if you walk them for 30 days, you'll never get them to trot. You better go to the trot pretty quick so that they don't get so deep in the walk. Lessons from mistakes and help from other people. Got to mention my son Jamie. He's always been a good aid. I guess just always look at the horses as they change. You have to change with them, depending from one horse to the next. Probably one rule is never ask a horse to do something today that he's not ready for. If you need to back up a date of what you done the day before and then try it again. Worst thing you could get is a horse frustrated.
That's a really good tip, Roger. Thanks for that. Alexis, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, kind of getting closer to showtime. So I know we've kind of gone beginning stages. Like a few things you should always remember to test before you go do it at the show is things like ribbons. Horses don't know what that is flopping around their head. That test run ribbons at home. So that way they're comfortable. Things like that, making sure they're good with clipping. So when you take them away from home, that they're not going to just totally try to, you know, get antsy about it, things like that. There's just a lot of those small things you got to remember to always try, like brow bands, cavesons, ribbons. You know, if you use a really big oversized show pad, you know, if it falls below and hits them differently, it's just things like that you got to remember, because any little different thing is going to be a big effect when you go to a new place.
So we just have about 15 minutes or so left. So I want to just have kind of your experiences. So I'm interested in your favorite amateur owned and trained horse that you've trained and a little bit of a story about them. Because I think that would be kind of interesting for people. So we'll start with you, Roger. What's, of all the horses you've done amateur owned and trained with, which one is your favorite and why?
I think the one that I won on in '08 that I spoke of earlier. We raised her ourselves. I'd had a line of horses for several generations, and she was just such a pleasure to train. It was easy, and she's won quite a little bit, and just been a good horse. Although she belongs to my wife, I give away the best I ever owned.
I'm sure she doesn't bring that up at all, Roger, right?
Well, the whole story is I give her Tag's mother, and that was before we was married, and then Tag come along, and I wanted a fraternity on her. And then I had to marry the owner just to get half interest back in my horse.
Well, so you still have her today?
Still have her, yes. We lost a colt last year. Had a beautiful little sorrel colt with a filly or star in her head, little filly colt out of hashtag, and so we hope to maybe try it again. But she's been a very pleasurable horse in our lives. We still enjoy her, and she's still our pride and joy.
Very good.
I've got two geldings that she has given us, and we trade. That's our pleasure now. Barb's got where she can ride, so we go trail riding now.
Very good. How about you, Alan? Favorite horse?
It's a tough question. I've had several favorites.
Okay, well, tell us, just pick one or two.
One or two. Okay, let's see. Well, probably my first one that I actually did well on was Playboy's Golden Traveler, and that was one I actually bought from Clyde, and did all that training. He was probably one of my favorites just because I liked how his front end was and how he did. Broke over pretty naturally. And then probably...
Hey, Alan,
Yeah.
be sure and brag on the one that you beat me on.
Which one was that? Then the other, probably the third one that I actually wanted the fraternity on was Play Dixie for me, and we raised her. She was pretty natural too, and she had the kind of front end that I like. But those are probably my two favorite ones. And there's others. Grand Theft Auto, I'm a New Man. I like those two. They're pretty tough. All pretty good horses.
You've had a pretty good run, Alan. I will say Play Dixie for me has always been one of my favorite horse names. So I don't know if you or Lisa came up with that, but I've always liked that name.
Well, she's out of Dixieland. No, what was his name? Yeah, Dixieland Fox.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Lisa just said one of her customers gave us that name. So,
yeah, no, I liked that one. Very good. How about you, Alexis?
Well, the one I had in my mind, I figured I should just bring up that Squirrel was pretty special. That's the first time I ever won the fraternity. And big part of why that one was really special is the garlands for that show happened to be donated back. And they happened to be made by my grandmother. And I looked down and saw it and instantly recognized it. But the reason why that was that much more special, she actually died the Wednesday of the fraternity during COVID. So it was just one of those that it tied all of it together. And the funny part, though, is everybody's like, your grandmother's riding with you. I'm like, no. If you knew my grandmother, she was the one in my horse's ear telling her to mess up so she could mess me up. Like, that was the one thing about her. She was just ornery. That was her. But the most special one, it's actually my mom did all of the work because I was given the horse when I was 1, and it was the Dream Queen. That little gray mare she taught me to ride. I'll put it that way. She didn't give me a hall pass by any means. She taught me how. And I had her up until I was 27. Just lost her 2 years ago now. And let me tell you, she was the one. She could foxtrot a hole in the ground. She could go do it. I showed anything and everything with her, and she was just that special one for me.
And how about you, Amy?
Oh, I don't have favorites. I love them all. That's why I'm a hoarder. I keep them all because I love them all. I probably have a special place in my heart for Lily, my Lily mare, because I learned so much on her. It took me 2 years, but I finally did it and won a blue on her at the celebration, her 4-year-old year. That's how slow I am. But my guess is Candy, my 3-year-old from last year, will probably end up being a favorite. She was another one slow, but by the last show of the year last year, she walked and trotted and started putting it all together. So I'm kind of excited to show her this year again too. So just like I tell my students at school, I don't have any favorites.
You have favorites. Sure, you have favorites. All right, one more last round robin question. If someone's listening and they're thinking, okay, do I want to do this? Give me your best sales pitch on why someone should get involved and do the amateur owned and trained classes. Alexis, we'll start with you this time.
I don't know. I feel like Alan will appreciate this being a coach and Amy being a coach too. But my first thought was Nike, just do it. Like there's no reason not to. It's a learning experience, and it doesn't matter if you go out and do great or if you do terrible. Just enjoy the ride that you put together. It's just all about how you feel about it. And I would say there's no reason to hesitate because there are a lot of people that will be willing to help. It's a call, a trip. We can always tell you, okay, you're doing good on this. Here's the next step, or this is what I would do. You have plenty of help. We're all here to be there together, basically.
How about you, Roger?
Well, it's kind of a personal bond between me and the horse, and enjoying watch a horse develop its natural talent, and probably just the pride of being able or doing it yourself. I probably enjoy riding and training at home in the barn more than I really enjoy the showing part of it. But you got to show to be judged by what you do at home. Main thing is just enjoy it.
Very good. Amy, what would your sales pitch be?
Well, I think they've hit on the big things for me. It does, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of frustration that goes along with it, but when it finally comes together, I don't know how you could not be so proud, and that feeling is awesome. You do gain this great community where everybody is willing to help themselves or help each other, and that's awesome. And you just get this bond with your horse. You know your horse so well because you are with them every single day. You know what to expect, and it really is a really awesome experience. You learn a lot.
And last but not least, Alan, what would your sales pitch be?
Well, it's hard to add to 3 great commenters like that. Perseverance. If you're a person I love getting out there and doing the 2 and 3 year olds. And after that, I kind of get bored with them. So that's why Amy has one of my old mares that y'all's uncle raised. And I'm ready to kind of move on to the next challenge. So if you like the challenges, you're a person that will take on a challenge to get out there and do it. And if you never had a foxtrotter before, like everybody said, kind of find somebody maybe you can with the Pivo. I actually bought one of those after Amy told me about that a year or 2 ago, or when COVID was. Get somebody to help you out through that way and say, well, you need to do this or do that, or this is what I do. There's nothing wrong with that. And get out there and get the challenge and go for it. And you do have to have patience. If you're a person without any patience on a few things, I usually don't have much patience, but with the horses, you have to take the challenge and don't expect in the one day. Don't expect it in a week. 2 or 3 months down the road is where you're really going to start seeing a big stride.
Those are really good things to think about. We've talked a little bit about the futurity. I do want to mention to everyone that's out there, the MFT-HBA does offer World Grand Champion titles in amateur owned and trained. So it is sort of that big goal you can kind of look at, but a lot of local shows, especially in Missouri or Arkansas, around in those areas, will have amateur owned and trained classes. I mentioned our Region 4 Fall Festival that we do in September. We actually do a high point in addition to class, we have a high point amateur owned and trained. So it's just not for one show. There are other avenues to take a horse that you do all the training on and show and can get out there and promote them. So, our hope is we'll see these classes continue to grow and compete, continue to have really good competition, because there's some really, really good horses that are in them. And so I just encourage you to reach out. I know all 4 of these people that are on the call today, if you had questions and you reached out to them, they would be happy to help you and encourage you through that. No matter where you're located around the country. The nice thing about all the virtual things is there are more avenues today to get help than there were years ago. So I appreciate all 4 of you being on here and being willing to do this. It's certainly not easy to sit on a call and be virtual and be live, but hopefully we've encouraged at least a few more people to give amateur owned and trained a try. So I'll just close out there. If anyone else has any final words, otherwise we will close out for today.
To ride one is to own one, right?
Or to own lots, if you're most of us, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of them. Yeah.
They're like potato chips. Is that what they say? Can't just have
Yep.
one. All
Can't
right.
have just one.
Yep, absolutely. Well, again, thank you guys so much for doing this. So we appreciate you, Roger, getting on the phone. Alexis, Amy, Alan, thank you guys for joining us by video, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you for having us, Amber.
Thank you.